Thank you to Ford Foundation, Templars Law Firm, Open Society Foundations, and African Women on Board for making this edition of the podcast possible. These conversations are meant to amplify thought leadership emerging on the continent on topics and themes including women's leadership, security, creative and tech power, climate change, trade, youth participation, and so much more. We believe that these modern perspectives will bring about real change on the continent and help us communicate Africa more accurately on the world stage. Hello and welcome to the Africa Self-Power Podcast, a show changing narratives and improving realities by incorporating vital and unseen African perspectives into global conversations while strengthening connections with the global diaspora community. My name is Folashade Anozie, and for our second episode of the 2023 Summit Edition series, we are talking to 4 leaders from the world of sports about philanthropy, investment, leadership, infrastructure, and community building. Joining us are Joakim Noah. He's a 2-time NBA All-Star and the founder of Noah's Ark Foundation. Lyzz Ogunwo, she's the Vice President of International Development and Global Impact at the National Basketball Players Association. Victor Williams, who's the CEO of NBA Africa. And finally, Stephanie Rawlings-Blake, who's the Executive Director of the National Basketball Players Association Foundation and a former mayor of Baltimore. Hello, Joakim. Welcome to the Africa Self-Power Podcast.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
How are you doing?
Very good. It's always a blessing to be here in Kigali, for season 3 of BAL. So it's very inspiring to all of us to see the growth.
Who are you rooting for?
Oh, I'm definitely rooting for Senegal. Amadou Gallo has always been so special to all of us, all the basketball players coming up, and he's been so supportive. So to see Senegal in the final right now is very special.
That's amazing. That's cool. And this is your first time at the Africa Soft Power Summit.
Yes.
What has because I know you spoke on a panel, and I'll get to that later. But what has your experience been like at the summit thus far?
Well, I just got here 5 minutes ago, so I can't tell you too much about the summit.
You haven't yet spoken. Okay.
I haven't yet spoken.
Yeah.
I just got here, but I'm really excited. It's very good to see how powerful people can come together through sports. Sports is such a unifier, and to be able to come together and talk about investment and talk about economic growth in our countries in Africa, I think this is it's what it's all about, and couldn't be more proud to be here.
Yeah. Well, looking forward to your panel. And I want to talk a bit about your Noah's Ark Foundation.
Yes. So I started this foundation with my mother. I come from a family where I understand the importance of social work. I think that a man's richness is really in what he can give back. So our foundation focuses on sports empowerment, and also art. So it's about letting these kids express themselves and being able to build programs for them. So whatever we can do to keep these kids off the streets and doing positive work, I think that's what it's all about. And I'm very proud of the work that we're doing with our foundation, and also the bridging what we're doing in America and the work that we're doing in Africa, and building bridges for the kids from the diaspora for them to understand and feel their identity.
Yeah, I was just about to ask you that. Are you looking to set up chapters of your foundation here in Africa? Because I hadn't seen any.
Well, this is a very exciting time for us. We have funding now to be able to do some special projects like this. When you're living in America, especially the inner city kids, they have no connection with their roots here in Africa. So this is definitely projects that we want to do in the future. Working here in Rwanda especially, I think there's some real synergies with the reconciliation and the history of this place. I think that there's really something special, and there's a real connection with what's going on in the inner cities of America, and building those synergies, I think, is going to be very, very powerful.
Yeah, and something that I also saw that your foundation does is this. I guess it's an initiative called Drops of Consciousness. Can you speak a bit about that? I thought it was super, super cool.
Thank you. Well, the drop of consciousness is it symbolizes a tear. So there's a lot of I played for the Chicago Bulls for 10 years, and the violence in Chicago was out of control, and a lot of mothers shed tears. So that's what it symbolizes. A drop of consciousness were necklaces, pendants that we sold, and all the proceeds went to our after school programs, and people were wearing them around the city and very proud to, to have that message around people's necks.
Yeah, I think that's super important because I went to law school in Chicago, so I know what you mean. Now, final question before I let you go. What was the last song or album that you listened to?
For me, I'm very inspired by Bob Marley. I think that Bob Marley is the most influential person of the diaspora. His message lives on so strong. He's a message for the people. So I was listening to Africa Unite actually on my way over here. So symbolic, and it makes a lot of sense.
Hello, Lyzz. Welcome to the Africa Soft Power podcast.
Hello, it's a pleasure to be here.
It's a pleasure to have you here, and thank you so much for coming. This is your first time at the Africa Soft Power Summit, right?
Yes, this is correct.
What has your experience been like thus far?
Powerful. First and foremost, being around my people, and this shared vision for prosperity for our communities. There's just so much power in that alone. And then just the reach of the influence and the drive and the innovation across so many different sectors. It's first and foremost inspiring, but then also it just breeds innovation and desire to act and do more. So it's really been great to be here. It's been refreshing, rejuvenating, and inspiring.
I'm glad to hear that. And you spoke on the panel, hopefully I have that right, the economy of sports.
Yes.
Driving transformative impact in Africa's sports ecosystem.
Yes.
Can you speak about your experience on that panel and if there were any, not if, I'm sure there were, maybe one or two insights that your co-panelists shared that you just resonated with you?
Yeah, I think we had a great mix on the panel, right? We had the diplomacy side, the sports diplomacy element. We had the hard economic development side. We had the personal testimony of athletes, and then also the anchors and supporters too, leveraging sport as a conduit for impact across African markets. So I certainly was inspired by Victor's command of the growth spots, right? When we're speaking about data and infrastructure investments, how those are critical to any advancement. I think Joakim speaking to the personal infrastructure investments around in support of youth as being critical for any progress. I think those are two things that really stuck out to me.
That's really nice. So his name is Joakim.
Joakim Noah.
I interviewed him and I called him Joakim and he just didn't say anything. I feel so
Yeah,
I feel so
sure,
bad.
I'm sure that's his name in Spanish.
Yeah, oh my God, I feel so bad. But well, that's okay. But you're the VP International Development and Global Impact, the National Basketball Players Association.
Mhm.
Can you speak about what your role is?
Yeah, certainly. So for about 6 years prior, I was focused on the philanthropic support of our players, our athletes. How are we supporting them and having the best and most impactful impact in the communities where they're from and where they play? And as the league continues to grow more and more global, over 50 players with roots to the continent, with the past four most valuable players being international, there was a need to hone in on social impact on a global scale. And that's where this role came together, doubling down on the continent where there's so much passion and so much opportunity to support our players and those ecosystems. So that's really where the role came from, focused on bringing together partners, stakeholders, advancing individual player social impact work, but overall impact work across the basketball ecosystem here on the continent.
Now, I just wanted to know, during the course of my research, I noticed that you spent over a decade in in politics and government before, and I wouldn't say you transitioned because I feel like it's like a slight pivot, right?
It comes together in the
Yeah,
end,
exactly. Yeah. So can you briefly share what led to that pivot into sports? Because it's still connected to politics and the social issues and policy. So can you share a bit about that?
The real reason
real,
why, or
real.
the podcast version why?
Well, you know what? The real. I prefer the real version.
The real reason why. So honestly, I got into politics. I believed in President Barack Obama, so I hopped on his campaign trail, worked with him, went to the White House, the Obama administration, went to his reelection campaign, came back to the White House, and there was a change in politics, right? So we were politely asked to leave our roles in the White House, but there was an opportunity to continue to support visionary community leaders around that impact work, and it was a natural transition. Coming to the Players Association, the vision of protecting, supporting, and amplifying our players, that's very much mission driven work, and that's why people go into politics, into government, is because they believe in the mission. They want to have impact. So it's a combination of a change in politics for the country, but then also being able to continue that mission driven work.
Yeah. And one of my colleagues has a question for you, so I'm going to ask you. So, well, you're super passionate about connecting people to resources and bringing about change, whether that's in communities or policy. And you also serve as a strategic advisor to executives and professional athletes. Now, she wants to know, what advice would you give an athlete who wants to take a stand or lend his or her voice to political human rights violations, whether it's whatever political issues, but the athlete is concerned about probably losing sponsorship, getting cancelled? How can athletes in this day and age walk that fine line of being advocates and using their voice to bring awareness to an issue, but still being concerned, which is a real concern about the financial issues that can come with that?
Yeah, I think authenticity and integrity is key. I think showing up where you are and your level of understanding and change that you want to see is important. I think it's also critical to do that education right, do the learning, sharing what you're learning as well too, and recognizing that you may not necessarily need to be at the forefront, but you can be leveraging your platform to bring those technical experts to the fold, to the forefront, and serving as a convener. So I would say those, be authentic in where you are, hone in on the education, and then really leveraging your platform to bring in those technical experts.
Yeah, and I think that's so important, because a lot of times people feel like they have to be the face.
Yes.
And sometimes, like you said, put the experts there and just support them from behind.
Yeah.
You don't have to be the one who's always
Exactly.
in the forefront. Now, final question before I let you go is, what was the last song or album that you listened to?
So I listen to gospel in the morning.
That's fine. What was the gospel song?
So I was listening to Maverick City Music.
Oh, someone said to
morning.
me yesterday. That's awesome.
I was listening to Gyra and Promise, but I was also listening to a little Thames. So I have Thames on repeat still.
Yeah.
Hopefully she'll hear this.
Yeah, I hope
and
so
come
too.
back to the States to perform soon.
Yeah, that's
But,
great.
yeah.
That's great. Now, final question is, what is the most fun aspect of your job and rewarding aspect of your job?
I think the most fun thing is how sport brings together so many different people. Like, honestly, Sade, I probably would never be having this conversation with you. It just transcends. And so it's so exciting how one day I could be talking with a player that we're supporting. One could be a banker. One could be somebody from the community that just really loves the game and is a super fan. So it's that interconnectedness, I think. And it's like a different experience every day.
Yeah. And do you have any closing words for the Africa Self Power team?
I say, just job well done, phenomenal. Just I wanna play a part, right? How can we bring more young leaders to be able to tap into this network and opportunity, and sign the Players Association up to help?
Hello, Mr. Williams. Welcome to the Africa Self Power podcast.
Hello, it's great to be here.
How are you doing?
I'm doing well this morning, thank you.
Great. So this is your second time at the summit.
Yes, I was here last year as well.
Yes. How has your experience been thus far?
So far, I think it's interesting to see how the summit continues to grow and how many more people are coming to Kigali at this time to participate. And but what I think is true this year and last year is a great lineup of speakers and stimulating discussion.
Yeah. And what is it about the Africa Self Power Summit that aligns with, the brand of NBA Africa?
Yeah.
Can you speak more about that?
So when we envisioned the Basketball Africa League and what it could do for sport and the creative sector in Africa, we envisioned that it would help convene people who are interested in the creative industries from a broad range in addition to sports. So fashion, film, storytelling, content, music, and they would all be pulled together with sport. And so what this summit is doing and the people it is pulling to Kigali is very much aligned with what we hoped that the Basketball Africa League finals would be able to attract around it.
Okay, that's great.
Yeah.
What would you say is the most challenging aspect of your job?
The most challenging aspect of my job?
Yeah.
Look, I mean, I think probably the most challenging aspect is that we continue to grow sports in Africa, and that sport in Africa is yet to come to its full commercial contribution. And so growing the commercial side of what we do is probably the most challenging aspect of my
What
job.
would you say is the most fun aspect of your job?
Oh, the most fun aspect of the job is everything we do on the court. So from the work we do with our youth in junior NBA programs across more than 15 countries across the continent, the work we do with our elite youth at the academy level, and what we see happening on the court from a professional level at the Basketball Africa League, seeing the joy of the game and people expressing their talents and their creativity and competing at a high level is the most fun aspect of the job.
Great. And then can you speak about, just before we wrap it up, some of the initiatives that, your organization does? Because, we have a lot of African athletes who are looking to build bridges across the continent. Can you speak more about that in terms of collaboration opportunities?
Yeah, so I mean, certainly from if I think about, sort of the key pillars that we focus on in terms of, let's say, basketball development, at the end of the day, we want to make this sport one of the most popular and most widely played on the African continent. And so there's lots of opportunities to collaborate with us on the grassroots level to take the game into countries and cities where it's not being played. There's opportunities to collaborate with us on building the infrastructure around coaches and referees. We desperately, I would say, we would welcome role models who've played the game at the highest level and want to impart their knowledge to the young people with whom we work. We're looking for partners to help build infrastructure around the continent, everything from basketball courts all the way up to arenas. And we are also very interested in telling the story of what we're doing on the continent. So partnering with creatives and having them bring their particular talents in music and film and storytelling to what we do, and amplifying the nexus between basketball and their areas would be another area of collaboration.
Yeah, and you talked about the issue of storytelling.
Yeah.
Why do you think that's important?
Well, I think storytelling is important because it really elevates and puts into context what we are doing. And I think storytelling resonates with people. It lodges in the mind and persists in a way that perhaps is different from other forms of communication. And so I think as we continue to shape this century of African excellence and creativity, doing it through storytelling is really a very powerful vehicle.
Yeah, because I asked that question because, a lot of times you hear about storytelling,
Yeah.
and sometimes that can just seem so far away.
Yeah.
And it's always good to be able to just explain why that is important.
Yeah. So, I mean, if I think, for example, about some of the amazing stories of the youth in our academies and how they've progressed in the game of basketball, the stories of the players that we saw on the court yesterday at the Basketball Africa League, and the challenges that they've overcome to play at that higher level. I think when you package those into stories, it's very powerful, and it can also speak to some of the larger issues that have shaped them.
And also inspire other people. Yeah.
Absolutely.
And my final question is, what song or album did you listen to the most? I mean, we're still like half of the year. So it could be 3 months ago. It could be maybe yesterday. So what song or album did you listen to the most this year thus far?
This year thus far, just a few weeks ago, it was the anniversary of Bob Marley's passing. And so I spent much of that weekend listening to Legend, which is my favorite Bob Marley album. It's a compilation of many of his best songs.
Okay, great. And any final words for the Africa Soft Power team?
I would say that congratulations on another successful summit. This continues growing and becoming bigger and better. And we look forward to continuing to share this space in Kigali for in future years.
Hi, Stephanie. Welcome to the Africa Soft Power podcast.
It is my pleasure to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
It's a pleasure to have you here. We're trying to get you yesterday, but you were super busy. So I'm really happy that we're able to get you today.
Well, more jet lag than busy.
Oh, I
Yeah.
see. Have you kind of adjusted a little bit?
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
Great. And how was your experience yesterday?
The summit yesterday was wonderful. Had a lot of great conversations, not just during the panel, but afterwards. Even through the evening, people came up to me that heard the panel and had comments. I think a lot of people care about women's representation in government, and it was exciting to see that.
Yeah. And this is your first time at the summit.
First time at the summit, first time in Rwanda, first time on the continent.
How has that been, besides the jet lag?
Besides the jet lag, it's been wonderful. Kigali is a beautiful city. The people have been extremely hospitable. The food has been wonderful. The service everywhere we've been has been wonderful. I'm addicted to African tea now.
Are you going to take some when you're going back?
Well, I don't know, like you can get, I need like all of it. You know what I mean? Like
yeah.
it had like milk in it and
I
ginger.
see.
And
Yeah. I haven't had that though.
really?
Yeah, I saw that though, but I had, because I'm lactose intolerant.
So am I. I took the loss because it was good.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm loving it.
Look, I'm happy to hear that. Now, your political career, for people who are listening who may not know, you're the former mayor of Baltimore, and your political career kicked off when you became the youngest person ever elected to the Baltimore City Council. What inspired you to pursue a career in politics and public service?
So I was raised by parents who valued public service. My father, who was passed, was a mathematician, but he pursued elected office. So when I was in elementary school, he started running for office. And at the time of his passing, he was one of the most powerful men in the state of Maryland. He was the chairman of the Appropriations Committee, did a lot of work to uplift our community, did a lot of work as far as education, and he inspired me, as well as my mom. My mom is still living. She's a retired pediatrician, and she could have worked anywhere and decided to work in our community because she wanted to make sure that people in our community had access to the best health care. And she would have patients that would be well, in their college years, still trying to come to her office and sit in little chairs because they loved her and the care that she gave them. So I was inspired by that. And I was taught to use my skills, my talents to make my community better. So when I was very young, I knew that's what I wanted to do, and I just pursued it. Everything from student government to Young Democrats. After graduating from law school, it just happened to be the year that my local election was happening, and we had 3 city council members per district, and 2 of the 3 weren't seeking reelection. I was like, God is, trying to tell you something, right? So I ran, and even though I was the youngest, because I'd been in Young Democrats, I'd been in the state central committee, I had more political experience than just about anyone except for the one remaining incumbent. So it was a great opportunity for me to do it, but also to engage my peers. I had my friends from law school and college and high school working with me on the campaign. And I think it was an inspiration for me, but I also know I inspired more young people to serve.
Yeah. And you talked about, when you were in high school doing
Student government.
Exactly, student government. Sometimes you have some really ambitious children who know what it is they want to do. So I don't know, in their minds, they know that if I want to go down this path, I need to do that. Were you scared to do those activities, or instinctively you just knew that I have this gift of giving back to people, whether that's public speaking as well? What activities can I do, or do I need to do to ensure that it's in line with where I'm trying to go to? Even though you were super young at that time.
So, I thought about that recently, because in my mind, these were the things that I wanted to do since I was young. But then I think about the ways in which my father exposed me to influential Black women. He took me to the courthouse to see the first woman sworn in to the circuit court in our state. He took me to the Thurgood Marshall Law Library when it was being dedicated. He introduced me to all of these powerful women, right? So as a child, I could see myself in them, and it inspired me. So I think if you do this parenting thing right, you tap into what your child's gifts are. And I feel like, I wouldn't call it brainwashing, but you put them in the position so they can see themselves.
Yeah.
And I have a daughter who's 19, and I strive to do that, to put her in a position where she can be exposed to what's possible for her future.
I love that. What is possible? Because I feel like a lot of times what separates people is just exposure
Absolutely.
and opportunities.
Absolutely.
Which is why I wanted to ask about that. Now, as a woman in politics, what challenges? I'm sure you get this question all the time. Yeah. What advice would you give to young women interested in pursuing a career in politics?
Mm-hmm.
I feel like maybe if I had asked you this question maybe like 5 years ago, your answer may be different. But the world is changing now. So it may be hard for a woman to, according to society, stand up for certain, values or principles. So what advice would you give to a woman who's interested in going down that path of having a career in public service?
I think a lot of things have changed in the last 5 years.
Yeah.
However, unfortunately, a lot of things remain the same.
True.
You have to pick and choose your battles, I think, and you just have to strive to be excellent as well. You talk about what obstacles do I face. I was never one to focus on the obstacles because I felt, not that I didn't believe that I had them, but I felt like everyone has obstacles. Everyone has something that they're dealing with, or that, that may prevent them from getting to where they want to be. Like, we understand that there's some people whose path has been, cleared for them, but I'm talking more broadly. If you're not wealthy, if you're not all of those things, you have stuff that you have to deal with. And for me, I always thought, this is the hand that I've been dealt. I am going to use these cards, play them to the best of my ability. I'm playing to win. And that's how I would focus. I would never focus on the obstacle other than this is something that I'm going to get on the other side of because I'm determined to be successful.
Yeah. And you're the executive director of the National Basketball Players Association. Can you speak a bit
about the foundation?
Foundation.
Yes,
Sorry about
That's
that.
okay.
But yes, the foundation. I stand corrected. Can you speak about the work that you do for people who don't know?
Right. So I help direct philanthropy for the players. So one of the things that we do is do matching grants. So every player is eligible for $25,000 matching. So if they write a check for $1, we'll match it. If they write a check for $25,000, we'll match it. And what that gives us a chance to do is amplify the work that these players are doing. My goal is to help them achieve the change that they want to see in the world. I'm working very hard that they're doing this work in better collaboration with the cities that they're doing the work in. As a former mayor, I'm trying to make those connections. And I'm also trying to look for ways that we can coalesce around things that they care about, like nutrition security, disaster relief, cancer prevention. How can we use these resources that we have differently to be able to really push the needle and affect the change?
Yeah, really important. Now, one of the major missions of Africa Soft Power is building bridges with the diaspora and the continent. As someone who's in the diaspora, can you speak about why that is important?
There's so many reasons.
Maybe like one or two reasons.
So being here on, World Africa Day, I see how our power has been dispersed throughout the globe. And it's not bad that we are everywhere, but because we have yet to be connected in a way that brings us all up, we're not able to leverage, the bridges. I feel like we're weakened. So it's important for us to recognize that there are mutual gains and to build on them.
Yeah. And as we wrap it up, what was the last song or album that you listened to?
Oh my goodness. I can't tell you the last song I'd listened to, but for some reason, a disco song, Do the Hustle.
Maybe I know.
Oh, if I hummed it, it would be horrible.
What is it?
It's do 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 do.
Yes. I see. Yes.
Why was that in my head all morning? Do the hustle.
Maybe, I don't know.
I have no idea.
It's amazing how the brain works.
Yes.
It's amazing. And obviously, Tina Turner passed.
Oh.
And I just wanted to ask your thoughts on what her music meant to you and will continue to mean to you as, we move on. And
Yeah,
just
I
celebrate
thought
her.
about her this morning as I was listening to an interview, and I saw on Broadway, there was her life story in the musical. And what I took away from the interview, the play, and her life is being so aggressively and passionately, authentically you, and not being afraid of the power that comes with that. I mean, she lived in all of it.
Yes.
And at the same time, with humility and grace. So I'm just like, it's hard to put it all into words, but she was such a gift. And, to see that even though she had trials and tribulations, she found her way to joy.
Yes, she did. May her soul rest in peace. Thank you to all our guests on this episode. To learn more about Africa's Soft Power, visit africasoftpower.com. If you enjoyed this episode, please rate us on your preferred podcast platform. Also check us out on social media to stay up to date on our programming. We are on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook at Africa Soft Power. This episode is produced and edited by Folashade Anozie. The show's executive producer is Dr. Nkiru Balomu. Music for the show is by Imodu Ayonote. Till next time, thanks so much for listening.